But I think COVID-19 also has accelerated, amongst other things, expectations and desire from stakeholders around the need to go to a more decarbonized economy quicker.
Well, good evening, Felipe. So good to have you here at the event's Fireside Chat. So I'm really, really excited to talk about the oil and gas industry, but especially about what you are doing as a person, as a leader, also with Ecopetrol. So excited to have you with us.
Patricia, thank you. It's a great honor to be with you today.
Well, we do have quite a bit to cover. We have limited time, so let's kind of, first of all, set the context for everybody that is watching us. And the context is really that the COVID-19 crisis in 2020 already had quite a bit of an impact on the oil and gas industry in Colombia. Actually, I just read the latest report from the authority, the Colombian Petroleum Association, ACP, that, you know, the output was actually down by 100,000 barrels a day over last year. 2021 doesn't look any better either. So my first question to you, Felipe, is how did your company, how did you manage to go through 2020?
Very quickly. So I think the COVID-19 has been a crisis that has touched everyone around the world. And in addition to the crisis around prices and the drop in prices, we faced COVID-19 by setting up very, very quickly early on in early March, already a 24/7 operational crisis team, a COVID crisis team, and a finance crisis team. And I think COVID-19 showed us the fragility, how fragile we are as human beings. But it also allowed us to actually do the best in terms of our ability to be part of the solution. And in that sense, Ecopetrol has been fundamental in keeping Colombia running by providing Colombian citizens and industries and the medics and the hospitals and everybody else with the gas and the diesel and the gasoline and the energy that's required.
So what was the main message you tried to really convey during that time?
The first one, life first, safety first, and that's no negotiable. So, for example, in one of our refineries, we had to bring the throughput down by almost 50% to adjust to demand disruptions. And we shut down we kept 8 plants running out of the 54 that we have in the refinery. And we brought in the equivalent of a SWAT team from the National Health Society. They went through the plants, they went through the protocols. And this was following the death of one of our employees because of COVID. So very quickly acting, showing leadership in times of uncertainty where we're still learning from the virus, but I think it's saying that safety is always first.
This is not the first crisis you're going through personally also as a leader, Felipe. How does the 2020 and also the 2021 crisis really compare to, for example, the crisis in 2010, where you were a pivotal part? How does it compare to 2015-16?
There's a couple of differences. If you look at it from an industry point, there was demand destruction this time. And demand is going to take some time to recover. If you look, for example, of jet fuel, it may take, who knows, more than 5 years to recover. So I think that was the first thing. And the other thing is that this crisis is an ongoing crisis. We may still need, 12 or 24 months to come back to a place similar to that where we were before COVID. So it's difficult, but I think prior crises help you be ready to react very, very quickly, to lead and to allow your teams to give them space, give them direction, clarity, but give them space as well. And also understand that people are apprehensive, people are afraid, people are worried about lots of things, starting with their personal safety and that of their loved ones. So a lot of empathy, a lot of humanity is, I think, what's also required in this crisis in particular.
Yeah, and I think this is so pivotal what you're saying, Felipe, because a lot of people live in anxiety. Of course, one part being the health issue, the other part is also if the demand goes down, and you were just mentioning also, fueled for jets down, I think more than 50% last year. Job security is another question that hangs on people's minds and also potentially damages the confidence and the psychology of your staff to keep the motivation up. And you just mentioned maybe 12, maybe 24 months. This is an ongoing crisis you foresee.
Absolutely. So one of the things we did was very early on signal that we would respect and secure all the jobs that we directly control. And I think that was very helpful. And also we told people before lockdown started here in Colombia that all of us would go and work remotely. And we had done a very large, intensive digital transformation that basically underpinned our ability to do that. And the other thing is we defined or came up with this concept of it's called Mínimo Vital Operativo, which is the minimum vital for operations. So every station, every pipeline, every refinery, we knew if we needed 5, 10, 15, 20 people per shift, not more, not less. And very early on, we adopted a very proactive, very intensive testing for COVID and protocols, and working with authorities and communities, because a lot of this has had to do with rebuilding trust. You know, as we go back into the communities where we work, we have close to 350 active work fronts in Colombia right now. So we need to ensure that the authorities and the communities sees us as somebody that's doing things responsibly, and it's taking care not only for ourselves, our people, but also the communities.
And proactively so, as you were saying. Felipe, let's move on our conversation and look at kind of the second part of the theme we're talking about tonight, and that is leading through a crisis while transforming for a sustainable energy future. Now, I think I actually start sensing in the business community more and more a paradigm shift where people, and I think last year's WEF conference, it was the first time that economic leaders actually saw that the climate crisis will be a pivotal threat to even the economic future going forward. So I think ESG is something that is vital. I know that Ecopetrol is one of the big players when it comes to ESG, with a T, adjunto, added. But I wonder, how do you balance this shift of transformation whilst you are in a situation of preservation during this crisis?
So I think the first thing is that you need to genuinely believe in the merits of being an advocate and actually doing or delivering on your strategy around ESG. And you mentioned the T. And we actually, inside Ecopetrol, internally, we talk about TESG. So we talk about technology, environmental, social, and governance, because we think technology actually sort of embraces everything, and it's one of the best sort of levers that we have. A couple of days ago, Patricia, we were one of the 61 companies announced by the World Economic Forum on the stakeholder capitalism metrics. And the only company from Colombia, the only company from Latin America, and one of the few oil and gas companies. And I'd say this is something where we're just showing we may not have all the answers. We're not 100% in everything in terms of how we need to report, how we need to do things. But when we think about our commitment to reduce our carbon footprint and decarbonize the business that we're in, provide better quality fuels, be a gassier company. We're setting up 15 eco reserves for reforestation, restoration. We're doing a lot of in terms of renewable energy. So there's quite a few things where we've laid out the agenda, we've laid out the strategy, and we're delivering on that agenda.
Well, it's interesting because the technology you just mentioned, which you add to the ESG, I think is quite fundamental because you are a company that seems to embrace AI, that seems to embrace blockchain and tries to really, try to really transform a space which is still dealing with fossil fuels, which is the main driver. And I think you announced that you're going to invest this year, 2021, about $3.5 to $4 billion in the growth, coming back to growth of the business. And a lot of it goes also into the renewable part, into increasing your gas output, I think, for the next 3 or 5 years to 35% from the current levels. So there is a big push, despite trying to stay afloat during the crisis and falling demand.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I remember, Patricia, 3 years ago, when we first mentioned, it's actually 2.5 years ago, that we were going to build our first solar park to actually provide power for our own operations. Most people, or some people inside the company, said that's not possible. The numbers don't work. But that first park has already allowed us to save over $1 million in the first 12 months of operation. And when people ask me, are you guys producing oil and gas with solar energy? And the answer is absolutely yes. And we've committed ourselves to actually have, by the end of this year, 8 solar parks that overall can help us reduce over 1 million tons of CO2. So it's ensuring that people understand, why is this a good business decision? It helps with the reduction in emissions, but it makes sense also from the lifting cost and the total cost of operation. So I think as we're advancing in terms of reducing, for example, flaring, in terms of actually joining forces with Colombia, you may have seen that Colombia has announced that by 2030, the country will reduce 51% of its emissions, greenhouse gas emissions. So we're actually sort of doing a lot of work and say, how can we help get to that place? And I think you use the word leaders, and I think Ecopetrol is a leader in that sense. We see our role, a very powerful role, to lead in that space, and actually people value that. Shareholders or stakeholders, people say, "Wow, you're actually very serious about the transition, and you're giving us proof day in and day out."
Yeah, you're putting money where your mouth is. You have the government, you've got government projects, especially I think in the wind business as well going. And of course, innovation is at the heart of what you are doing in terms of transformation, looking into technology. And, in that context, I wonder, so as we are migrating more and more towards, cleaner energy sources, and I mentioned the Petroleum Association of Colombia before, another threat they are seeing is generally the availability of oil and gas in Colombia. And they say that unless you tap more and more and embrace more and more unconventionals, there might be a long-term issue. And I had you quote, I got a quote from you, which I loved, Felipe, and you said, energy is the tool to inclusion, because whatever you do, you seem to always do in a wider sense, looking also at the, I think, 16 million people that through their pension funds are actually invested also in Ecopetrol. So you have that bird view. The unconventionals, how difficult
Absolutely.
is it really to balance that?
Yeah, so most people won't remember, but energy security and self-security and self-supply of hydrocarbons was only achieved in Colombia in 1986. And we've had the ability to provide our own fuels and our gas and the gas to the people that actually require it and need it. You were mentioning these the fact that if we do provide energy to people, we're actually ensuring that we can help close some of the gaps and bring some equity, if you will, or actually equidad in Spanish.
The inequality, yeah.
Yeah, and it's because people can, they can move, they can transport themselves, they can study, they can work on a laptop, or actually they can start a business. So we do think that Colombia requires several sources of energy, and we will continue to look at more gas, onshore and offshore. It's fundamental. 30 million out of 48 million Colombians touch the gas every single day. It's important, but we need to do more. Unconventionals, I think, provides an opportunity for us to continue to have access to both liquids and gas. You know, it can provide a source of an abundant source of gas. If you look at the example in the US, you know that in 10 years has dramatically changed the geopolitics of oil and gas. So we will start something called a pilot project around unconventionals. We've already signed a contract with government late last year, but there's a couple notions that I'd like to share with you. One, we've said this pilot project, which is to get enough data and to help science allow us to take informed decisions as a country in terms of pursuing or not unconventionals. We've said it's not about doing it quickly or fast. It's about doing it well. And the second notion that is embedded in ourselves is this pilot, it will be like operating inside a fishbowl. Everybody will be able to see inside, you know, communities, the authorities, the NGOs, academia, the unions. And actually, we're going to be using things like blockchain, back to technology. We will have, for example, 24 stations to monitor sound and noise around the project. And we have water quality stations, and we have air quality and VOCs and potential radioactive material sources. And everything is going to be set up there, and the data will be available online with the help of things like blockchain. So it's about transparency, you know, where we started the conversation.
Especially, absolutely, especially when it comes to an issue that is somewhat controversial around the globe, especially because of the water issue. But no, I think it is very interesting, considering that some geologists actually see that you have 7 billion barrels worth of reserves when it comes to unconventionals in Colombia, number 2, I think, of the Latin American countries. Felipe, we need to start wrapping up our conversation. I could go on for a lot longer, but outlook. Let's talk a little bit about the outlook. And I wonder about the challenges you see. You talked about maybe another 24 months, but let's talk about it in a positive way. I mean, the overall theme is, you know, energy forward, rethink, redefine, renew. Where do we need to rethink, redefine, and renew, and with what sort of dynamic?
So I think that we need to first be very human around or have a lot of humanity, you know, in terms of what's going on, because people are struggling. And in that sense, we leaders have the opportunity to provide pathways, to provide opportunity, and to actually say, look, this is how we can all sort of ensure that the crisis is not going to be as hard as eventually it might be. But I think COVID-19 also has accelerated, amongst other things, expectations and desire from stakeholders around the need to go to a more decarbonized economy quicker. And in that sense, it's about electrification. It's going to be around reducing our CO2 footprint, also reducing our water footprint. By definition, anything that we do as human beings has an impact. So how do we actually mitigate it and reduce it? And I think that, and I'll share something with you, just a few days ago, very few days ago, we presented a non-binding offer for the largest energy transmission company in Colombia. This could be a deal up to $4 billion, but it's a company that has a lot of its businesses already are carbon neutral. It's very well run. It has presences in Brazil and Chile and Peru and Bolivia and in Colombia. And it could equate roughly to 15% the size of Ecopetrol. Putting our money where our mouth is saying, we want to continue quicker in terms of decarbonization. It may have surprised some people because they said, oh, we thought you were going to go into power generation. We're doing renewables for our own businesses, but we've taken, I think it's a quantum leap step. It's an important step. It's transformational. And if this goes through, it will create I think, an even more resilient company that's actually advancing quite quickly in this TESG agenda.
Felipe, I think this is amazing, considering also, Colombia did sign the Paris Agreement. So you are adding to that big picture as well with this kind of strategy on an industrial and a corporate level. So I think what you perhaps tried to say during our conversation, it's about recovery. It's about a human recovery, but it's especially about a green recovery going forward.
I think both things can happen at the same time. It's about recovering the spirits, the minds, the health, and working with the anxiety and the apprehensions from people, and ensuring that people see that there's an outcome out there, a scenario or a pathway that is positive, where we can be optimistic, where all of us have a role, and we can jointly continue to work around the recovery, economic recovery, the human recovery, which is fundamental.
Felipe, thank you so much for your time. I absolutely enjoyed our fireside chat. Felipe Bayon, the CEO of Ecopetrol. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity.